Hey guys, it's Cassera, and today I'm going to be doing my book talk for The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. So The Inheritance Cycle is a series that I really loved in high school, and I've recently reread it, so I decided to film this video right after I finished reading it. I don't know if this video is going to come out right away, just because I have tons of videos coming out right now, so it might be a while before this video comes out, but I wanted to film this video while it was still really fresh in my mind, because it's been a while since I've read the series, and having reread it, I have a very different perspective on the series than I did the first time around. So for those of you who don't know, there are 4 novels in the Inheritance Cycle, including Eragon, Eldest, Bersinger, and Inheritance. So this is a young adult epic fantasy series following the character named Eragon, who finds a dragon egg while he's out hunting and becomes a dragon rider, which is fantastic. I absolutely love the concept of the series. It's definitely really epic. It follows kind of like the classic Lord of the Rings, Chosen One sort of hero tropes, which I really loved. It was my introduction into high fantasy. It's definitely a really great starter series. This is the series that I feel like other YA series should emulate. I think it's just exactly what you would want from a YA series, because it's fast-paced, has fantastic world building, has really interesting characters, but is still really hard on them in ways that a lot of YA books just aren't. And while there is like romantic tension in this book, it in no way overtakes the plot of the book. It's just one of my favorite series of all time, and I highly recommend it. If you haven't read this series though, I don't recommend you watch the rest of this video, just because this is a book talk video, and in all of my book talk videos, there are spoilers completely. They're basically just like spoiler-filled discussions of these books. So if you want to read the series, please go read the series first, and then you can come back and watch the video. So we're gonna go ahead and get into the spoilery discussion of the Inheritance Cycle, which I'm just so excited for. So first of all, in these videos, I talk about 4 things: character, plot, world building, and writing style. So we're gonna start with character, of course. So the main character, Eragon, is fantastic. I absolutely love him. I love all of his moral quandaries that he goes through. He makes a lot of mistakes, but he tries to atone for them in really interesting ways. I guess the best example of that, of course, is Elva, which he blesses in the first book to basically be a shield rather than to be shielded. And he really does atone for that over and over again throughout the series. And I felt like that was just such a good addition to the series also. I know that's like a plot thing, but like it just changed Eragon's character so much. It's just an example of how hard the author is on his characters, because just like understanding that you change someone's life in a bad way that irreconcilably can definitely change someone very much emotionally, and it's really hard emotionally on the characters. So I really liked that aspect of his character and his character development. I think it worked really well. I also think he's definitely a very different character in the first book, in Eragon, than he is in Inheritance, because you can tell by Inheritance, like, the series has matured a lot, as well as Eragon as a character. Like, he's definitely way more mature in the last book and way more self-sacrificing. Not that he wasn't in the first book. He was a little bit more selfish in the first book. Like, he was kind of all about revenge and trying to kill the Razak, which I feel like in the 4th book, he was way more thinking about the people and like all of the responsibilities that he had as a dragon rider. And I really love that aspect of his character. There are tons of other characters I can talk about in this book. Brom, oh my gosh. Brom's death in the first book caught me off guard. Like, I forgot that he died in the first book. I don't know. Like, it's been 8 years or so since I've read these books, and I just reread them after 8 years of like not having picked them up at all. That one just really caught me off guard. After Brom's death, I was like, okay, other people are gonna die in this series, but for some reason, that one just really surprised me, and I love Brom as a character. He's definitely like kind of that classic mentor type character, and I love that he's Eragon's father, but Eragon doesn't know that he's his son. It's just a really interesting, complex relationship. When Eragon finds out about that and all of that, it's fantastic, and I really love it. And just Brom as a character in general, and how strong he is after he loses the love of his life and his dragon and all of the things he does after that. Brom is just a fantastic character that I absolutely love. And then we have to talk about Arya. I love Arya so much. And I love that she's like 100 years old or whatever, but there are still things that she learns from Eragon, especially like in the later books. I think that is really interesting. And I really enjoyed kind of like the friendship that Arya and Eragon have. And also that Arya is not like completely an elf anymore because she spends so much time with the humans and the dwarves, and just that aspect and complexity to her being and who she is. I really enjoyed that. Oh, one of the best characters in this book, I can't believe I forgot to mention this before, is Murtagh. Oh my gosh, he's one of the best characters in this book because he's kind of like an unlikable character. I feel like at the beginning especially, even though like at the very beginning in Eragon, he's like friends with Eragon, he's still kind of like an unlikable character because like he beheads that one soldier that like couldn't defend himself and things like that. But then towards the end, where he should be an unlikable character because he's supporting the Empire and working for Galbatorix, he kind of becomes a likable character. Like, I didn't remember a lot of what happened in Inheritance, so reading it this time around, I absorbed like a lot of the things that happened in Inheritance that didn't happen in the other books, especially a lot of what happened when Nasuada was captured by Galbatorix and was in Urbane in the palace there and being tortured, and a lot of what Murtagh did there, and like the way he protected Nasuada even though like he was being forced to hurt her also, it just made him a very, very interesting character. And he's one character that I would like really like to get like a sequel series or something from Murtagh, because that would be really interesting. Murtagh and Thorn, we don't get as much of Thorn in the series as we do Murtagh. I think there's like 2 scenes in which Thorn is like a really main character, one in Eldest and one in Inheritance, but overall like we don't get too much of Thorn. But Murtagh, like, wow, he is a very well written character and probably one of my favorite characters in this series, just because of how complex his character arc and development is really interesting, and he's one character that I definitely want more of. Of course, there's Nasuada. I don't have a whole lot of opinions on Nasuada because she's just like your typical political leader. I do like the kind of relationship that she has with Murtagh because it's almost like a love-hate relationship, because she can appreciate him for protecting her, but at the same time, she's never gonna forgive him, which makes the relationship really complex in a way that a lot of relationships aren't, and I really like that. But overall, I didn't have a whole lot of opinions on her, but I did think that she is definitely a very strong character. And while we did get a lot of point of views from her, and I think they were necessary, she was not one of my favorite characters in the series. She's a good character, but she's not necessarily a very interesting character, if you know what I mean. At least she wasn't to me this time around. Maybe in another reread I'll like her more, because I know, for example, another one of the characters that is really fantastic. Wow, there's a lot of characters in this series. I just keep coming up with other characters that I like. But one of the other characters that this time around, when I was reading Eldest, I really loved his character arc was Roran. Because the first time around, I didn't really care for Roran scenes. I was always just like, it's a Roran scene. Let me just skip through this really fast. But this time around, I loved Roran's plotline. Like, it was so fantastic. Like, his motivations and all of that for, like, uprooting the village of Carvajal and bringing them to the Varden and all of that was fantastic. I loved every second of that. And just like the complexities with Sloane and Roran wanting to marry Katrina but not being able to ask Sloane, and all of that was fantastic. I loved every second of that. Like, I love those sort of societal, complex, like irreconcilable differences that are in Roran's storyline. That just, it really worked for me. And I love Roran as a character. Like, he is very much a classic fantasy trope sort of character, especially with him like with the hammer and all of that as opposed to a sword. But at the same time, I absolutely loved everything about his storyline. I feel like I'm forgetting some characters. Auric is another character that's really interesting. I love Auric as a character. Oh, and Saphira, of course. Saphira is one of those characters that's like super wise and old, even though like she's really young. I love every second of Saphira's character as well. Oh, one character that I did hate. There was one character that I hated, and that's King Oren. Oh my gosh. Yeah. He's such an annoying character. Super frustrating, especially at the end. Like in Eragon, the first book, or maybe it was in Eldest. I think it was in Eldest. I actually liked Oren as a character because he had like this sort of quirky eccentricity thing that kind of reminded me a little bit of Luna Lovegood, which is like weird, but like it worked for me. But like by the time Inheritance came around, I was just like, shut up, Oren. You don't know what you're talking about. Just go away. Why are you even here right now? So yeah, he got really annoying at the end, but like I liked that I didn't like him, if you know what I mean. And last but definitely not least, I want to talk about Oramus and Glader. I love them as well. They're, again, like your classic like mentor type characters. I really, really love their storyline, and like their ending was so tragic. Like it hurt me, like their ending, but it was really good. Really, really good. I love like all the characters in this series. There's not that many unlikable characters, which is like my new thing that I really like, but like nostalgically, I love these characters. So next we're gonna talk about plot. And the plot, I feel like, is what surprised me the most in this series. Because I remember reading it the first time around thinking that Eragon was good, loving Eldest and definitely Brisingr, and then being very disenfranchised with Inheritance. But I think I understand why, because Inheritance is not a bad book. I actually really, really enjoyed Inheritance this time around, just compared to a lot of the other books that I'm reading at this time. But like back then, all I was reading were these books and then like other really great series like the Harry Potter series and the Hunger Games trilogy and things like that. So Inheritance being probably my least favorite book in the series, despite being a really good book, I was disenfranchised with it. But I do think the plot of Inheritance is really good. When I was younger, I was very absorbed in Eragon's plotline and just like the revelations of what was happening. And honestly, with Inheritance, all of the revelations that happen at the end of Inheritance, unlike the ones that happen in Eldest and Brisingr, which are not easy to guess, they can be guessed, but they're not super easy to guess. I feel like the ones in Inheritance are pretty obvious as to what the revelations are gonna be. So the revelations weren't as shocking in Inheritance. So like that made me a little disappointed the first time around, but I feel like the action and like the actual resolutions of what happens, it really worked for me this time around. So I really enjoyed that. Also, the whole Nesuwata Murtagh plotline, I didn't remember at all from the first time around. I think it just completely ignored it the first time around, and it's fantastic in Inheritance. I absolutely love that plotline in Inheritance. It's one of my favorite things that happened in this story. I'm trying to think of some of the other plotlines because they're really good. Like, I love the ending for Eragon and Arya too. It's definitely a very bittersweet ending. And one thing I loved about the series as a whole is how hard and devastating a lot of the consequences are for these characters. So I mentioned Elva earlier in the video. That is a huge consequence for Eragon, but it was an incredibly interesting part of the plot for me. There were tons of people who died in this series, which surprised me because I didn't expect it from a YA series, even though like I've read this series before. So I should have definitely known this, but like Brom dies in the first book, then Ajahad, who's the leader of the Varden, and then of course there's the King of the Dwarves, I forgot his name. Oramus and Glader, oh, their death, like just, it killed me. Even though like I knew it was gonna happen. I remember it from the first time around, but this time around, it's still like, it was really hard on me. And I didn't expect that. Like, I don't know why, because a lot of fantasy series, they feel like, especially YA fantasy series, don't actually kill off characters like that. But like Inheritance Cycle, they didn't shy away from it at all, and it was really good, and I really enjoyed like every second of the plot. And I love the way that the revelations are written, because they're written in such a subtle way that, like I said, guessable, but at the same time, especially the revelations in Eldest and Brisingr, you're not expecting them. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. Next, we're gonna talk about world building, and this is another one that like the world building in this series is so good. Now, I do understand the ancient language and like some of the culture of the elves and the dwarves, all of that. A lot of it is taken from Tolkien's Lord of the Rings series, but like it's still really well done. Like, and I still really enjoyed that aspect of it. And then there's the history of the dragon riders and things like that. That's definitely not inspired by other series, that I really enjoyed that aspect of it as well. And I just feel like it was just a really well-built world with really great details, and I enjoyed every second of this world. Lastly, we have to talk about writing style, and I think this is the part that really surprised me about the Inheritance Cycle, because when I was reading in high school, I didn't really care about writing style. It wasn't something that I paid attention to. But like now, I do really care about writing style. It's one of the things that makes me really love books or really hate them if the writing style is not my favorite. The writing style in this series is really good, especially in books 3 and 4. I felt like the writing was beautiful and perfectly done in Brisingr and Inheritance. I do think the writing style was a little bit disjointed, at least the pacing in Eragon was a little weird, and then in Eldest, it was a little slow. And then there were times in Eldest that I noticed Eragon will be talking to Oramus and just like a butterfly will fly by or something, and there'll be like an entire sentence dedicated related to this butterfly that just interrupts the narrative of the story, which kind of like took me out of the story at times, which I didn't like. But overall, the writing style is so beautiful and so detailed. I loved every second of the writing style, and I wasn't expecting that at all. So I definitely really enjoyed that aspect of the series. I think that's all I have to talk about. I know I'm gonna remember something after I finish filming this video, but like this video can go on for hours if I don't stop talking now. So that's all I have for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments some of your thoughts on this series, and if you like the series as much as I did. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. I post videos frequently on this channel, so consider subscribing. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up to support my channel. All social media links are in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.